In 1928, a woman named Catherine Donahue, one of the radium girls, had her jawbone removed due to radium poisoning, and she was left with a gaping hole in her face, unable to eat or speak properly. A constant reminder of the horrific price she paid for painting watch faces with glow-in-the-dark paint made from radium. But here's where it gets dark. The company she worked for, the United States Radium Corporation, knew about the dangers of radium poisoning as early as 1906. Yet they continued to hire hundreds of women to paint watch faces with this toxic substance, without providing them with any protection or warning them about the risks. These women, mostly teenagers, were told to moisten their brushes with their tongues to get a finer point, thereby ingesting small amounts of radium every day. And by the time they started to fall ill, it was too late. Nobody talks about this part, but the women were so contaminated with radium that they would glow in the dark, and their bodies would emit a faint radiation that could be detected by Geiger counters. A haunting reminder of the industrial disaster that had unfolded. The story begins in Orange, New Jersey, where the United States Radium Corporation had set up a factory in 1917, and hundreds of women were hired to paint watch faces with glow-in-the-dark paint, made from a mixture of radium and other chemicals. The women were paid a decent wage, but they were not told about the dangers of radium poisoning, and they were not provided with any protective gear, such as masks or gloves. The company's owners, Arthur Roeder and Joe Kelly, were more concerned with making a profit than with the health and safety of their employees, and they went to great lengths to keep the truth about radium poisoning hidden. On June 7, 1927, a group of 5 women, including Catherine Donahue, sued the United States Radium Corporation, claiming that they had been poisoned by radium, and that the company had knowingly put their lives at risk. But here's the thing. The company had a team of lawyers who were determined to discredit the women and deny any wrongdoing, and they would stop at nothing to silence them. As the lawsuit dragged on, the women's health continued to deteriorate, and they began to suffer from a range of symptoms, including anemia, bone cancer, and necrosis of the jaw, a condition that would become known as radium jaw. The women's bodies were literally disintegrating, and they were in constant pain. Yet the company continued to deny any responsibility for their suffering. In 1928, the women's lawyer, Raymond Berry, discovered that the company had been conducting secret experiments on the women, without their knowledge or consent, and that they had been deliberately exposing them to high levels of radiation to test the effects of radium poisoning. And this is where everything fell apart. The women's case against the company was gaining momentum, but the company was determined to shut them down, and they began to use every dirty trick in the book to discredit them. The women were subjected to intense scrutiny and harassment, and they were accused of being hysterical and attention-seeking, but they refused to back down. On May 12, 1928, the court ruled in favor of the women, and the company was ordered to pay them a settlement. But it was too little, too late. Many of the women had already died, and those who were still alive were left with permanent damage to their health. But here's where it gets even darker. The company's actions were not just limited to the women who worked for them. They also had a profound impact on the wider community. The radium that was used in the factory was not just ingested by the women. It was also released into the environment, and it contaminated the soil, water, and air. The people who lived near the factory were also exposed to radium, and they began to fall ill, a testament to the far-reaching consequences of the company's reckless actions. As the years went by, the story of the Radium Girls was all but forgotten. But in the 1990s, a group of activists and historians began to uncover the truth about what had happened. They discovered that the company had been aware of the dangers of radium poisoning for decades, and that they had deliberately covered it up. The activists also discovered that the women's case was not an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger pattern of exploitation and abuse of workers, particularly women, in the early 20th century. And this is where the story takes a particularly sinister turn. The company's actions were not just driven by greed, but also by a desire to suppress the women's rights movement, which was gaining momentum at the time. The company saw the women as a threat to their power, and they were determined to silence them. A stark reminder of the darker aspects of women's rights history. The climax of the story came on October 15, 1938, when Catherine Donahue, one of the original Radium girls, died of radium poisoning. At the age of 37, her death was a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of the company's actions, and it sparked a wave of outrage and activism. The women's case had been a landmark moment in the history of women's rights, and it had highlighted the need for greater protection and justice for workers, particularly women. But here's the thing. The company's actions were not just a relic of the past. They had a profound impact on the present and future. The story of the Radium Girls was a testament to the ongoing struggle for women's rights and workers' rights, and it served as a reminder that the fight for justice is never truly won. In the aftermath of the women's case, the company was forced to pay out millions of dollars in settlements, and they were forced to implement new safety measures to protect their workers. The women's case also led to a major overhaul of labor laws and regulations, and it paved the way for future generations of workers to fight for their rights. But the legacy of the Radium Girls is more than just a legal or historical footnote. It's a reminder of the human cost of exploitation and abuse. The women's story is a testament to the power of courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming oppression, and it serves as a warning to those who would seek to exploit and harm others for their own gain. And this is where the story ends. But the impact of the Radium Girls' fight for justice will be felt for generations to come. Subscribe for more stories like this, where the darkest secrets of history are uncovered, and the truth is revealed.